Hi, and thanks for joining. Today we're going to take a look at Mad Max. It was recently released by Warner Brothers. It's been developed by Avalanche Studios, which is a Swedish game studio. I hadn't heard of them until this release, however, they seem to make a fairly solid product. Let's go ahead and fire this thing up and have a look around. So, as most everyone is aware, Mad Max is kind of one of those hero arch type individuals. He finds himself out in a desert. There's no water. Food is very scarce. Yeah, everyone eats dog food when available, and whatever else they can manage to get their hands on. Basically, they all live in a wasteland. Lots of deserts, lots of other unsavory things out there, and as you can see in front of us, quite the motley cast of characters inhabiting it. So in the game, Mad Max is broken. Mad Max exists in a fairly large open world. Now, in this case, the open world is broken up into many different chunks. As you can see here on the map, they're broken up into different areas, different provinces, so to speak, each with a suitably Mad Maxy name, such as the Dry Gusty, Balefire Flatland, so on and so forth. Each of these areas is split up and is controlled by a particular baron. In the case of this section, we have this guy here, who's named Jeet. He has his little fortress here, which we're currently standing in. He owns this area. Now, looking in the upper right-hand corner of the screen is the threat meter for the area. The threat is either higher or lower based on how many objectives you've completed in getting rid of the forces of Scrotus. The more of them you take out, the lower the threat level will be. The end goal being to try and get it down to as close to zero as you can. Doing so unlocks various upgrades. Looking at an area that I haven't completed yet, you can see that it gives you a nice, easy list of what you have to look at, or what you have to look forward to, and what exactly needs to be done to lower the threat level to zero. And this breaks out for each individual territory within any given baron's area. There are 4 barons in total. We have Jeet down here, and then we have Gut Gash hanging out over here. Excuse me. Pink Eye lives up here. And then we have Deep Fry, which lives in Gastown. Gastown's kind of an interesting bit that we'll get to in just a second. It's not really like much of the other area. So looking around at the map, you have all these different icons. Each icon obviously gives you something else to do. Each one of these things represents an activity. Everything from an encounter, such as somebody who might want to talk to you, a place where you can go to get scrap with water. In this case, for projects, which we'll get to in just a second, you can track them on the map. They show up with a nice own little unique icon. And you have your camps. And then you have your missions. The blue pucks or blue tokens are for wasteland missions, which just occur somewhere out in the wasteland. Something that somebody wants done. Doesn't necessarily further the story, it's just something that they need done, and you seem to be the right guy to handle it for them. The other item of note is with a gentleman called Stank Gum. You get to know him early in the game. He's really not a very friendly fellow, but he warrants his very own icon that's all brightly colored, as are his cars and his areas in general. Now, the game takes place in 2 parts. The first part is on foot, which is where you will not spend the majority of your time. When you're on foot, you'll do the usual open world things. Dive into dungeons, beat people up, shoot things, blow stuff up, collect items. The other portion of it occurs with vehicles. In this case, behind us we have the Magnum Opus, as all tricked out on my first playthrough. With the Magnum Opus, every bit and piece of it is configurable, and it's all nestled nicely within a garage menu, broken up into all the various bits and pieces. Your grill, your armor, engine, so on and so forth. Buying the items requires scrap, which is the unit of currency that's used exclusively throughout the game. It's not really hard to get a hold of, and some of the larger quantities, like looking at engine upgrades, should you want that next bigger V8, it's going to cost you 2,300 scrap, which at that point it does become somewhat cost prohibitive. The good news is that you can complete the storyline, and get through a lot of the outside missions without having to spend a whole lot of scrap on stuff. Each one of the fortresses starts out in a form that's kind of just ugly and nasty. In this case, we have built Jeet's fortress up to where Jeet's fortress is at the pinnacle. It is as good as it will ever be. This is done through several projects. So you can see over on the right there's a list of them. Basically, each one of these give you a certain perk when you visit the stronghold. For example, water fills your canteen, which is used to restore your health. The maggot farm gives you food, restores your health automatically. So on and so forth. The end result being that should you happen to stop at a stronghold, all of your consumables are replenished. You can go out anew onto the wasteland. Speaking of the wasteland, we'll go out in 1 second. This funny little guy here that's messing with an engine. He's always funny and he's always little and he's always messing with engines, but he is Chum Bucket. He is effectively the lovable minion that rides along in the back of the car and helps you out with things. He's pretty handy with a harpoon gun and a wrench, as we'll see in a minute. And now here we are out on the wasteland. Now the wasteland encompasses several different biomes. In this case, this biome is large, open, and it's flat. Pretty decent for driving around and running into stuff. Let's jump back into the map here, and let's find somewhere to go. Let's go ahead and head up here to Deep Fry's place. Along the way, we'll probably run across some stuff. Like this guy, for example. So the guy that's running off. So the AI in this it can be a little wonky. Sometimes it will see you, sometimes it won't see you despite the fact it drives right in front of you. But when they see you, generally they'll attack. And there's old Chum Bucket in the back. Whenever he sees something interesting, be it a storm or tornado, bad guys approaching, he will usually point it out to you. Every now and again, he will stand up in the back of the car and point which way you need to go to get to whatever it is he's talking about. Wasteland is laid out with a whole bunch of roads all over the place. While you can go cross country, it's generally not worth your while as you can move significantly faster on the roads. In addition to that, the world is fairly big. So if one were to just go driving across the sand dunes, it would take quite a while to make it from one end to the other. In this case, we're going from the southernmost stronghold up to the northernmost stronghold. It'll take us a couple minutes to get there. The storyline is progressed through a bunch of different characters that will all give you tasks. Now these tasks are obviously going to follow something reasonable for a game about a dude in a car. You'll have to go here and get this, or go over there and blow that up. You know, there's not a tremendous amount of variation, however the mechanics of the game just make it fun. Then you have these random things like these guys that are just hanging out over here. Let's go ahead and take them out. I mentioned Chum Bucket in the back. It's pretty handy. So we switch over to the harpoon and we skewer this dude and then launch him over the car. He is out of the picture entirely. This is pretty handy, and as you upgrade him you get other things, like the ability to shoot explosive harpoons. Fairly reasonable for knocking out cars. And there's another guy over there, so we'll see if we can't just push the other car over the top of him and then just drive away as if nothing happened at all. Or going past it, up in front of us you can see that there's a balloon. Balloons are also annotated by an icon on the map, and the balloons are used for scouring the area, looking for camps, looking for other sites of interest that might happen to be around. It's important to note that the camps are rather difficult to find in most cases, so getting a hold of the balloons, riding up in the balloon and looking around is a pretty decent idea. While I'm thinking about it here, we've taken some damage as a result of us running into everything else with four wheels out here. So we'll show you Chum Bucket's most useful skill. You just simply send him out, he turns a magic bolt into the hood, and the whole car is repaired. His repair speed is upgradable. In this case, I've got it upgraded all the way, so he does repair this thing very, very quickly. One of the nice things about the game is that there's kind of a soft limiter on the amount of damage that you can take in your car. When your car gets down to critical, you're given an opportunity to jump clear of your car and go on foot for a little while Chum Bucket repairs the vehicle. That can get rid of some otherwise frustrating situations where you're out in the middle of nowhere, you're near an objective where you've just completed one, and you get jumped by a pack of folks that are much better armored than you are. Along those lines, the vehicular combat is in some ways a little imbalanced in my opinion. This imbalance comes from when you get up to the more advanced areas such as where we're going, the cars having a significant amount of armor on them, and despite the fact that I have the second heaviest battering ram on the front of this, if I run across a pack of 3 cars, it's generally advantageous to try and either convince the drivers to get out of the cars and then beat them up, or just simply run away. I don't know as though that was the exact intention of the design. However, that's where we ended up with it. And while it's not a bad system, in some cases it does seem kind of, I wouldn't say off-putting, but perhaps a little less than what would be expected. You know, when I think of Mad Max, I think of the ultimate in Road Warrior. He doesn't have to get out of his car to like ruin some bad guy's day, eat their lunch, what have you. But the game developers saw fit to build it that way, and I'm not going to really complain about it because they did make a fantastic game. As you can see, the biome that we're in has changed slightly. We've gone from a very flat area to an area that's a little more hilly, a little more mountainous. See, up on the bridge above us, there's a camp.
See the colors? This is a hidey hole for Stanko's Legion.
And as Chum Bucket just pointed out, it is in fact a little hidey hole for Stankgum's Legion. Now, Stankgum is one of those nasty enemies. Basically, he's Scrotus's second in command. And he pops up all throughout the campaign and heckles you and causes your life to be somewhat miserable. Until he finally gets his. Speaking of getting ours, this guy over here, run across him a few times, but haven't actually been able to get over there and get a hold of him. Last time I came through here, I did not have these cool little inappropriately named Thunderpoons with which to thunder them. This time I do. So we'll see if we can bring that bad boy down. What that is that's a scarecrow. Scrotus and his friends erect them all over the place to intimidate and cause other folks to be fearful. Which I would suggest that it works out pretty well. On some of them, they got a bunch of hanging dead bodies from them. All kinds of other things that say this could be you, and that's not great. They come in various different sizes. This one is either a large or a massive. And in the case of massive, they take quite a bit of ordnance to bring down. It is important to note, though, that you can use the regular harpoon and pull them down, but as we'll see in a minute, getting to this one is somewhat difficult. There we go. Alrighty, another threat has been lowered in Pink Eye's territory as a result of our actions in bringing down that big guy. That was energetic. Alright. The AI in this, as far as combat is concerned, is not the greatest, but it's not terrible. It generally drives better than I do, which is not really saying a whole lot. However, the Magnum Opus does have a much tighter turning radius than most of the other vehicles that you run across. See the little 2 over this guy's head, which means that he has the second level of armor protection on his vehicle, making him a fairly tough adversary. And in some cases, you may not necessarily want to try and defeat said tough adversary. So, what you can do is just jump out of the car. Chum Bucket will go around and he will start repairing the car, from your prior machinations, if you will. And then this guy will try and ram you until he pretty much gets bored and gives up and says, there is no way I can hit you. Should only be in a couple passes. Dodging was not terribly difficult as long as a sniper over there doesn't see see what's going on. Then if you should happen to hit the Magnum Opus while trying to squish me in the process, Chum Bucket will just simply go out and repair the thing. I want to speed this process up. We should be able to knock some armor off of him with a shotgun. With him that close. Okay, that didn't do us any good at all. I think we probably shot our own car. It's important to note that even though this game does contain a gun, or 2 guns, sniper rifles, predominantly used by bad guys and in some regards used by yourself, and this cool shotgun, the ammo for it is somewhat scarce. The predominant way of getting a hold of ammo is to just simply build the armory within the relevant strongholds. And there we go. His lunch is now cooked. Alright, we'll go ahead and jump back in this guy. And we'll deal with that sniper that's over there on the other side of the tornado. Now these twisters, they pop up more or less all over the place. And if you happen to drive into it, it throws your car all over the place. It can break stuff. Now these snipers are scattered all over the place. In some cases in towers such as this one. In other cases they'll be guarding particular point of interest or fort. One of the easiest ways to deal with them is just rip the tower out from underneath them using the harpoon. And that'll generally fix them. It's important to note that any of them that are freestanding out in the middle of nowhere, like that guy was, he will not come back. He's part of the whole threat level for the area and the region. So you can pull those guys down more or less with impunity. Have a grand old time doing it. That was cool. I don't know how many miles of roads are in this game, but it's entirely possible to have played it for 30 or 40 hours and run across somewhere that you haven't been and don't immediately recognize. Now granted, it all looks, in some regards, to be about the same. It is a bunch of desert after all. However, I do appreciate the fact that given the size of it, there is some form of variation. If there wasn't, I think it would probably not be quite as much fun. So the area we're getting ready to go into here is Gastown. It's the only area in the game that is not situated in a desert. It's Gastown. It's situated in the middle of a junkyard. Let's drive in there for a moment to kind of give you an idea of how the game looks, and it wants to show you the grungy and grubby side of the world of Mad Max. There's like just junk all over the place. It's one of the areas where going off the road does, in fact, make you go a whole heck of a lot slower. In most cases, you can plow through sand. There's usually no big deal. Oh, and here we go, some friends. Okay, I guess if you get too close to it, it will just simply move you into the sanctum. And the sanctum, as you can see, when I stepped in, it gave me a bunch of stuff. I ended up with a full fuel tank, full ammo, and some full canteen. I haven't built the maggot farm yet, so I don't give myself some full food, but that's coming at some point in the future. While we're in here, let's take a look at the other cars you can use. So you got a vehicle collection. The way that you gather cars is you commence the driver out of a car or just yank him out through the window with the harpoon, and then you grab his ride and you haul it to the nearest stronghold, and then you can use them for all time going forward. I haven't found much use for any of them. The reason being is because the Magnum Opus is pretty much designed the way you want it to, and it has a harpoon launcher, which is something that none of the other cars can state that they have. The only one that is of use, though, is going to be a buggy that you get very, very early in the game, the first one in your collection, called Chum's Buggy. Chum's Buggy comes with a dog, which you also acquire very early in the game. Dog. As you can see, the dog is sitting in the back there in what looks like a 55-gallon drum with a hole cut in the side of it. The cool thing with the dog is that he can sniff out landmines, which makes him pretty handy should you be in an area with landmines. Now, looking at character progression, there's one other bit that I'd like to show off here. In this case, there's a very strange gentleman who's out and about the desert here and there. Basically, he randomly appears in whatever zone you happen to be in, and you can go to him and you can trade in what are called Griffith tokens for bonuses to Max's base stats or Max's base abilities. While they may not seem like a whole lot in the actual playing of the game, they do come in extremely handy. They let you get more health for the water that you consume, let you use melee weapons for longer before they break. As mentioned, ammo is scarce. Melee weapons are not terribly scarce, so it's important that they don't break all the time. Before you go and you grab his abilities that we'll see here in just a second, before you grab those, you've only got 3 or 4 hits with a melee weapon before it's all said and done. That's pretty much the end of the story for that one. Then you have to go find another one, or just beat people down with your fists. Let's go talk to this guy.
Tell me about the ones you leave dead by the road. All the lives choked out.
Not my choice to kill.
You seem to enjoy it.
Never.
You don't fear killing because you think you control it. You tell yourself such. Blood is not on your hands, but on theirs. Perhaps it's not the killing you enjoy, but the moments of silence the fighting brings you.
So at the end of each one of his bits of dialogue, you'll blow some powder into your face, and then you're taken to this screen, where you can upgrade all of Max's particular sub-abilities, if you will. As you can see, I've got most of them already capped out. In this case, Max has been through the storyline, and I'm just kind of running around in the open world, just wiping out stuff, because it's fun. So we'll just go ahead and throw these in. One thing that might initially look to be extremely attractive is this guy, Adaptation. Increase Max's ability to consume less fuel while driving vehicles. Really, in my playthrough, I didn't find any point at which it was necessarily difficult to get a hold of fuel. And apparently, when you are at the level cap, you are able to cap all of those items out, which is pretty nifty. So you always end up in this kind of this posture following it. The first time I saw it, I didn't exactly know what to do, so I just kind of sat here for a minute, and Max just stays here, looking kind of drug-addled. However, you give him a little prompt, and up he comes. And the weird, strange man with a large backpack and all of his white stick figure paintings are gone. So we could jump back in a buggy and go tear off about the countryside, wiping stuff out. Now, one of the more impressive means of combat, which at the moment I haven't been able to show much of, is the hand-to-hand system. In this game, you get pitted against a multitude of bad guys. I mean, there will be just tons of them. In some cases, you'll have 8 or 10 people coming after you at the same time. The game does a fairly good job of handling this and managing it in terms of melee combat through the parry system. Now, from what I've gathered, the combat system is fairly similar to the Arkham series of games, whereby you just smash a single button repeatedly in order to perform a bunch of attacks in a row, and then have other means, or then you parry them, etc. So if you're too far away, they'll throw rocks at you. Little red thing over their head means that their attack is unblockable. That yellow means that you can parry it, but as you can see, I'm doing a great job of not parrying it. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll notice a meter, and in that meter determines what's called our fury. If I manage to fill that, Max will turn into a two-fisted, raging murder machine. Generally better to try and not click as much so that you can catch the parries, because you can successfully fight several folks at the same time, provided that you're not so far down clicking the X button that you're unable to respond to an attack. The other thing you can do is that you can always dodge. Dodging comes in very handy, especially if you're fairly low on health. Half the time, folks will run after you, and then you can hopefully take them out. There's also this method, which works really nicely. Or you can punch them, and that guy, which is one of the cool little upgrades that you get with him. The end result is that the combat system feels very, very satisfying. So now that we're all banged up and a little low on health, let's go ahead and drink some water and get some of that back. Alright, now with a little bit of health back in us, an empty canteen, go in here and scavenge around. Whenever you go into these sites, you're just looking for scrap, mementos, project parts for the various fortresses. Picking them up's a fairly simple affair. Those that are completionists shouldn't find it too difficult to clear every scrap out of every area. They don't hide them, I should say, ridiculously. Like, for example, you won't find some hidden place to shimmy through with a bunch of scrap sitting behind it. They just don't generally go that way. Now here is one of 2 food sources in the game. This is dog food, and apparently it's great stuff because it will fill your health bar right on up. The other source of food is maggots, which is kind of gross, but it gets the job done. Now in conclusion, I would say that Mad Max is a fairly great game for individuals who like stuff that is open world. Oh, look, some water. Yeah, Max doesn't jump so well. You're better off running around. Anyhow, back to the summary. I think that the game is pretty great for individuals who enjoy an open world and enjoy the freedom to pretty much do as they please within the world. It has a lot of driving, a lot of explosions, a lot of fairly nice hand-to-hand combat. Generally, it's a great time. It's a good experience, and I quite enjoy it. There were no particular bugs to speak of. The cinematics in the game and the storytelling is all fairly well done, as one would expect from a company publishing such as Warner Brothers. The voice acting is generally on point, and the characters do a fairly good job of being memorable. I will say, though, that perhaps some of the writing could use some work. However, I'm not the guy who designed the game, just the guy that critiques it. And with that concludes the review of Mad Max. If you want to hang out for the next 10 or 15 seconds, I'm going to drop a couple of opinions that involve some spoilers. So if you're planning on buying the game and you don't want anything possibly spoiled, go ahead and stop watching now. If you don't mind, then here in just a second, we'll go ahead and talk about some items that may contain spoilers. Alrighty, so looking at the items that contain spoilers. While I found that the story was great overall, and the narration and the cinematography was also pretty fantastic, the thing that really killed me about this game was the end of the game. And it wasn't necessarily that the game ended, it just at the end to me felt somewhat, tacked on. It felt somewhat artificial. You're going along and, Max is being his just usual pervasive, car-driving, badass self. And then all of a sudden the game ends. In addition to that, you kind of end up exactly where you started back at. It's as if the whole game, regardless of Max's life or whatever Max may have wanted to do, the whole game had no effect on Max. He started out being kind of grizzled and driving towards the wasteland to get away from everyone for a while, and he ends up right back in that same bucket. It's as if the character himself didn't manage to mature or grow or otherwise change throughout the course of the story, which is kind of a bummer, especially coming from this series of games such as Fallout, where you get to experience the character change. In Fallout 3, you had to deal with that wacko gentleman that likes to tie you to pieces of building materials and then push you off of cliffs and all kinds of other fun stuff. And by the end of it, you discover that you've gone from being just some college kid over into somebody who just murders everything in his path. Fallout 4, same sort of ordeal. Your character seems to grow, your character seems to build and to fit the role that they're put into as a result of the game. With Mad Max, I'm not entirely sure that that's the case, because he ends up right where he started out. The other thing that Mad Max does, and this is my biggest, just absolute biggest pet peeve with the game, it breaks one of what I consider to be the quintessential rules of open world games. With an open world game, when the player completes a storyline and goes on to the open world portion of the game, all the characters that died in the storyline should stay dead. They should not be magically resurrected. Now, I'm not going to tell you which ones, but there are a couple of fairly important characters that die towards the end of the whole storyline. And while that in and of itself is not bad, the second that you go over to the whole free world roaming area, it pops up a box and it says, "Oh, by the way, these characters are back," and then they offer you missions and such. And to me, it just seems as if it's just kind of tacked on, like, oh yeah, that's right guys, we need to include some open world roaming after the story, otherwise the media will hate us, and the press will hate us, and we won't sell many copies, instead of just simply rewriting the story. Now, granted, with my opinion on the story itself, that could be neither here nor there. I can see that Mad Max purists may enjoy the whole concept of, Mad Max is just kind of doing his thing, and then he gets wrapped up in some stuff, and then the next thing you know, he's off doing his thing again. However, it's not necessarily for everyone. Anyhow, that concludes the bit about the spoilers, the bit potentially containing spoilers. I hope you've enjoyed the review, and if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the box below. I will be starting a Let's Play series dealing with Mad Max, starting over with a brand new shiny game here in the near future. And if you'd like, tune into it. I'll be posting them to my channel, and look forward to talking to you some more in the future. Have a great one.